Okay, wow, I was not expecting to get so much support on my last video about this topic, so thank you to everyone who liked and commented. It really means a lot. With all that being said, I did promise I'd discuss certain skills and abilities these winners have, along with any updates they've gotten since then. I'll first start off by correcting some mistakes I made in part 1 that a few commenters were kind enough to point out. Let's start off with Marth. I said prior that I didn't like this ult as it was just a recolor of Marth's base design, but as it turns out that's not entirely the case. It's actually based off of Henri, the founder of Altea, Marth's homeland. Throughout Shadow Dragon and New Mystery of the Emblem, Marth's feats are extremely similar to what Henri did in his lifetime, so as a result, he is seen as the second coming of Henri. With all this added context, it really makes CYL Marth's outfit a lot more cooler, at least to me. Next up, I forgot some stuff surrounding CYL Tiki's outfit. Personally, at the time my interest in Fire Emblem was relatively low, and while I still participated in that year's Choose Your Legends, I didn't pay much attention to the fandom, so I missed out on some drama surrounding this ult. For one, a lot of people had issues with this ult because it's Tiki in her younger self's clothing. Back then, a lot of people had issues with this character because her younger self tended to be favored more when receiving ults, and they'd be treated as the same character, so one ult for Kid Tiki would also technically be an ult for Adult Tiki, much to a lot of people's annoyance. And I can definitely understand that. After all, while yes, they are the same person, they are vastly different in personality and appearance, along with being from two different games in the franchise, so it makes sense that a lot of people would be upset that one version of this character wasn't getting any attention from the devs while the other version did. All that on top of the fact that when the version they liked more finally got an ult, it just ended up being them in their younger self's clothing, when it could have been her in a Naga or even a Marth outfit. But moving on to our next corrections. Eliwood's outfit is actually from Blazing Sword's epilogue. I haven't played the game in a few years, so that's my bad for completely missing it. Golvik's odd pants actually match her younger self's pants. Thankfully, as a commenter pointed out to me, the reveal happened a couple weeks before her Choose Your Legends banner released, so they were able to avoid spoiling people. And lastly, a lot of CYL winners whose ults are their promoted outfits actually do have some minor changes to their designs to help them stand out a bit more. With all that out the way, we can finally discuss Resplendence and skills. Okay, so I was going to discuss Resplendence last, but after working on the skills and weapons part of the video, well, I figured it'd be best to talk about the cool outfits these characters get, as it's a lot more interesting. As for the skills, I did want to discuss their effects in the descriptions, but a lot of them have very similar effects that will make the video very stale really fast, so I'll stick to what their skill names are in reference to. We'll be grouping them by realms. Let's start with Asker, the region the Order of Heroes is from. Both Faye Veronica and Lucina have Asker themed ults. Both speak of Asker but in different ways. Veronica, the introvert that she is, speaks of how loud the people of Asker can be, whereas Lucina feels that she has grown really strong for having spent so much time here. She also mentions getting to spend more time with her father Crom, whereas Veronica wonders about her older brother Bruno. I'd say these ults are some pretty good upgrades compared to their base versions, though to be honest, the base versions are still really good, but a change of pace can be nice. Lucina's Brave ult in particular though, it really makes up for the terrible one she got prior to this one. I'm not even going to show it on screen because I just don't really like it. Our next region is Emblem. Only one of our Brave units has a Resplendent in this region so far, and that's Silica. She makes a reference to the complicated relationship Asker and Emblem have had throughout Faye's story and says it reminds her of Zofia and Ragel. This outfit really suits her. I'd say it's on equal footing with the Resplendent her mage version received prior. Both versions do feel like a step up to their base designs though. Moving on to the Land of Flames Muspel, we have Roy, Lyn, and Ephraim. I will admit, I thought they were all from Emblem on the official page as it only shows their heads before you click on more information. For Roy, both his Resplendents hail from two different realms that were at war in Book 2, so it feels like a subtle nod that the two kingdoms truly have found peace if he's able to have attire from both. I'm not sure if Faye has it so that each version of a unit is the person themselves just changing attire or if it's a different version of themselves. It seems Faye flip-flops back and forth on this. I remember when Crom got a Christmas ult and it was flabbergasted about getting summoned in it.
Change outfits once and I get summoned?
But back to Roy, much like his base form, he still admires his father Eliwood. Honestly, I'm a big fan of his attack art here. While he looked like he was calm and focused on his Brave design, here, he looks more intense and determined, really channeling the intensity Muspel characters bring to the table. Plus he has a fire sword, so him having an ult from a fire-based nation just makes sense and works really well. Our next winner is Lyn. Something to note is that it's possible for her to be Roy's mother. Eliwood and Lyn can't get mated in Blazing Sword, but it's often a forgotten pairing because both characters just have way better pairings. Back to the main topic though, Lyn's first Resplendent prior to her Brave one was actually the first Resplendent for Faye. I remember watching the Faye channel when it first got announced. Something really funny I remember about that is they temporarily replaced the usual FEH owl with someone else. It's like they were trying to protect her from the blowback Resplendence got when it first got announced. It was a rocky start, but since then people have come to love Resplendence for the most part. Back to her Brave Resplendent in specific, she states she feels a kinship between wind and flame, along with complimenting the princesses a moose spell, something our next winner does as well. The design itself is alright, but personally, I just prefer her base design. As of the makings of this video, our last Brave unit to have a Resplendent in moose spell is Emblem. I absolutely prefer this design over the Resplendent his Lance version received beforehand. It stands out more and the red and green really mesh well together and not in a Christmassy kind of way. Like I said before, he compliments the princesses of moose spell. Much like Roy, he also admires his father, impressed by his strength in wearing that armor. The red cape looks really cool too. It almost looks like it's on fire. Our next realm is Niffle, and our next unit to discuss is Eliwood. I know this video is on Brave units and I keep bringing up their Resplendent attires from their other ults, but I gotta emphasize just how much of an upgrade his non-CYL attire is. I mean, just look at this! Oh my god, year 1 and they did my boy like this, man. I do like that they tend to stick with either blue or lighter outfits with Eliwood as it really suits him. He likes both Resplendent ults he receives and is jealous of the Niffle family because he doesn't have any siblings of his own. Matching with his bestie, Brave Hector also receives with Resplendent and Niffle. I prefer this attire over his Resplendent Axe version received earlier. Nothing wrong with the moose ball design, I just really like the lightning artifacts he has in his base special trigger art. Plus, he looks much more menacing. As for his Resplendent Brave ult, I gotta say, off the special trigger art alone, it's an upgrade. I'm a huge fan of the ice effects, and the weapon and region go really well together. In his Resplendent, he's overjoyed to always have a sparring partner, which lines up with how much he loves to battle. It reminds me of Thor, especially since outside of this ult, Hector tends to have a lightning axe. For Hell, we only have one Brave unit, and that's Camilla. Honestly, it's one of my favorite Resplendent designs, and I really wish more Brave units got ults for this, as everyone who's received Resplendent in this region has had some stellar art. I do prefer this design over her fairy-based one. She cracks a joke about coming all the way from hell to get us, and speaks of death, both of which are in line with her personality. For the next one, I'm gonna call it the Tech Realm because I feel like I'd butcher how it's actually pronounced. Most of the Resplendents we see in this region look rather normal, like something we'd see in a more modern fantasy setting, which makes a lot of sense since it is the most technology advanced region we've seen in FEH so far. For our first Brave unit, we have Ike. The changes to his base are rather subtle, and that's not a bad thing. If anything, it feels like a small tweak to his base design, which is already really good. Like changes he'd make to repair his clothing if he's been traveling for a while. Going back to the technology stuff, since he's from a more medieval time period, the machines written in this realm look like strange beasts to him. He talks about always facing new challenges, and I can't help but feel like that's a subtle nod to Smash Bros. When the game would have a new challenger approaches with new fighters. Our next unit is Alm. Unlike Ike's outfit, which felt like a minor upgrade, this outfit is a completely new armor set. Something I'm not sure was intended is that Alm here looks older than his counterpart who received Resplendent in Emblem. It would make perfect sense as Alm and Echoes look slightly older when he gets his class ascension, showcasing that he's been in the Deliverance for a good while now. In both Resplendents, he talks about Silica and how he loves being around her. Unlike his Emblem outfit, he seems much more comfortable with this new armor set. I love that he kept his cape and a neck part from his base Brave design. Our final Brave unit to receive a Resplendent is Micaiah. Much like Brave Ike, this outfit looks like an upgrade to her base design. It stands out more than Brave Ike's Resplendent, however. She likes both her outfits along with mentioning her guidance of people and how she feels she must do all she can before she inevitably dies. Got a little dark there, For this portion of the video, the skills and weapons that are personal to the character will be discussed. Originally, I really wanted to discuss the stats and refines, but after doing some research, the video would simply amount to just me saying stuff like equal to or greater than, or plus X to all stats, a lot, and that would make the video really boring, because a lot, and I mean a lot, of them have this in their descriptions. Instead, I'll simply be discussing what the names could or are referring to for each unit. I will bring up effects if they tie into the character or the original game in any way like Bernadetta later on. But for now, we will be going in order of release. I'll also try to give brief summaries of the refines or skill effects if there isn't much else to discuss for the character. Let's begin with my glorious King Brave Ike. Did I really put that in the script? His axe Arvin. It's an axe based around taking hits, which could be a nod to how it gives plus 3 res to the wielder in Radiant Dawn. Of course in FEH, plus 3 res wouldn't help much, so instead he just tanks hits with damage reduction. This combined with Ether makes X an incredible wall. His next personal skill is Bayek's Blessing. The skill itself isn't all that impressive. It's similar to Nihil, a reoccurring skill in older Fire Emblem titles that cancels out battle-related skills, making both characters focus on stats alone. Next up, we have Brave Lyn with Sakei's Blessing. The skill itself is the reason why she ran the meta for a good while back in the early years of FEH. If the enemy unit had a sword, lance, or axe, they couldn't make a follow-up attack. It's really hard to deal with skill, but you can still find ways to counter her. Personally, I used my male Robin with Bowbreaker, that way she couldn't outspeed him. Man, I really missed her earlier with Faye. The name of the skill itself is a clear nod to Lyn being from Sakai. Personally, I love the endings of Blazing Sword that involve her returning home after her grandfather passes, as she discusses how much she misses Sakai when she's away from it. And while her fate is unknown in Binding Blade since Blazing Sword is a prequel, I do headcanon that she fought to the end against the invading Burn forces. Roy did get a weapon refined, but not much of a reference to the Binding Blade, nor did he get any personal skills. I will say I'm a huge fan of the fire around him in his design, as that is definitely a key factor to designing the character for most of his ults. It just looks really, really cool. Our last Future Legends 1 winner is Lucina. Her weapon refined buffs allies and grants special trigger cooldown charge when they're attacked. I think it's really cool that they managed to add a support buff bonus similar to what Awakening does for her weapon refine. It's a really creative choice in my opinion. Following Lucina, Brave Veronica also grants buffs to allies. The stat buffs on the refine, along with the stat debuffs enemies get, is staggered for weapons' pre-existing buffs and debuffs. So while it might not seem like much of a refine, the devs most likely had the pre-existing effects in mind for her buff. Our next winner is Ephraim. His weapon, Graham, actually differs heavily from his Sacred Stone's counterpart. It heals 7 HP to Ephraim, which a lot of blessed weapons tend to do. The reason I bring this up is because much like blessed weapons, Graham is very effective to use against monsters. While it won't heal the wielder in Sacred Stones, referencing its damage to monsters like this makes a lot of sense, unless I'm reaching. There aren't monsters in Fae, so they weren't able to fully translate the weapon's full effects. For Hector, he has a skill named Ostian Counter, referencing his heritage and homeland. Plus, it gives distant counter attack. Wouldn't be much of a Hector ult without some way of hitting back no matter what. Something I do enjoy is how all the legendary weapons from Blazing Sword have different weather-based art. With Hector, as I mentioned prior, it has a cool ice effects. It makes sense now how all these weapons could have once destroyed the world. Celica keeps it much more simple. I did briefly mention double line on Brave Celica in the last video, but let's go over it again. Its skill from Echoes, dealing -1 damage to Celica if she is at full HP, with the plus side of getting to attack twice in a row. For Royal Sword, just like in Echoes, it restores HP, so she's able to proc double line much more effectively. Moving on to Choose Your Legends 3, let's start off with Alm. His skill, Sense Skill, is his ultimate art in Echoes, so it makes perfect sense for him to have this skill as a Brave unit. He gets it after mastering either Falchion or Royal Sword, which brings us to his personal weapon, Draco Falchion. It's a unique upgrade to his base Falchion, so it differs a bit from his Echoes based Falchion. While it won't teach his arts like it does in Echoes, it still keeps its effectiveness against certain classes. Instead of being anti-terror in heroes, it's anti-dragon. Of course, it's effective against dragons regardless. I mean, it is the sword that seals Duma. But you get what I mean. Off topic, but fun fact, the place that becomes Duma's resting place ends up growing into a tree which Sticky is found in Awakening. Moving on to Eliwood, Ninna's Ice Lance grants him +3 speed along with +4 to all stats if he initiates combat along with extra damage to dragons and beast foes. His Refine changes to +4 to all stats to +5 if he is within distance of an ally or initiates combat, along with neutralizing any skills to prevent follow-up attacks. The +5 to stats is listed twice in his Refine, so I assume the total is +10. I could be wrong, but he also gets damage reduction if his speed is greater than his enemy. I believe I already mentioned this in the last video, but Eliwood's Lance being based on a rather unknown item from Blazing Sword is really cool. The item gives you bonus stats, hence why I discussed its effects and Refine here. Our next winner is Micaiah. Didn't realize this in the last video, but she's listed as a flyer unit. Pretty neat. As for the skills, she has Sacrifice, which converts penalties into bonuses and heals allies it's used on by as much HP as Micaiah has until she reaches 1 HP. Really cool that they managed to reference her abilities from Radiant Dawn like this. As for Yune's Whispers, it's an obvious reference to Yune and how she follows around Micaiah, and even guides her in the party at times throughout the game. Plus, you know, she's right behind her. Our last winner, Camilla, has a staff that makes it so that enemies cannot make follow-up attacks, along with built-in gravity effects and bonus attack and speed, both of which get buffed with a Refine along with -7 on defense and res to all enemies when a 3x3 spaces of her, along with attacks and speed buffs. She doesn't get any personal skills of reference in her kit, but thankfully our next set of heroes all do. Let's start off simple. Lysitia's Darkspike's T is a skill from her debuted game and even has effectiveness against cavalry units. Better watch out, Nerd Knight! In her base game, she's really great against cavalry-based enemies, so I'm glad they translated that well with her Brave ult. Next up, we got Dimitri. To start off, his weapon, along with Claude and Edo guards, are actually pretty hard to find in the game, those being Moon Gradivis, However Hedgeclair, and Wind Parthio. They also appear in multiple titles across the series, so it's really cool that they took this direction with the Brave Lords instead of just slapping on upgraded versions of their crest weapons and calling it a day. One last thing I'll mention is that each weapon name derives from the routes of each lord. Azure Moon and Moon Gradivis Crimson Flower and Flower Hedgeclare. And finally, Golden Wind and Wind Parthia. These ults had a lot more thought put into them than I originally thought. Speaking of the lords themselves, Dimitri's personal skill is Blue Lion Rule, a name originating from his house at the monastery and his route. Edelgard gets a personal skill matching this called Black Eagle Rule. It of course has different effects than its counterpart, but again, it's a reference to her house in the monastery and her route. And finally, Claude. Oddly enough, he doesn't have a skill named Golden Deer Rule like his fellow house leaders. Missed opportunity in all honesty, but regardless, that wraps up Choose Your Legends 4. For CYL 5, let's begin with Marth. I can definitely see why he ran the meta for a while. He has 2 personal skills. To start off with, we get Shining Emblem, which boosts both his and his allies' stats. Marth is known as someone who inspires people, at least that's how he's treated in lore, so having a skill that gives him and his allies buffs makes perfect sense. His blade, Genesis Falchion, comes with the standard damage towards dragons, along with adding more buffs to his allies. Being the first ever Falchion in the series, having the name Genesis added to it makes perfect sense. Our next winner is Erica. Her first skill is called Moonlight Bangle. While it has a different name, it looks like it's supposed to be the lunar bracelet she has all throughout the events of Sacred Stones. This, along with her entire kit being moon-based, serves to further prove my theory correct. It matches with her brother Ephraim's legendary ult, which is sun-based. As for Binding Regenleaf, it's a personal lance of her brother Ephraim. It's based around doing crazy damage. I do remember people being upset with this ult, as it felt like Erica was being put in the shadow of Ephraim, and I can see why. On the bright side, Erica fans got their win with Fire Emblem Engage. Moving on to our third entry, we have Gatekeeper. Both him and Marth come with skill buffs to distant and close counter. Other than that, Gatekeeper's personal skill is Detailed Report. I really do like that they stuck to his job attributes with this, as it prevents characters from being able to move past him, unless said units have the pass skill. Becoming more and more harsh the more range the enemy units have, he also gets Charging Horn, granting buffs to allies centered around him, even granting him more buffs during combat based on how many allies he's surrounded by, along with debuffs to enemy units. For his Refine, he can also treat structures in the area as allies if the enemy units can destroy them. He also heals his allies by 7 HP. Honestly, a really big fan of how they built his kit. It's really making him live up to his Gatekeeper role. And now for our final winner of CYL 5, Marianne. Like I said in part 1, she is a dancer-like unit. While the other dancers have that skill as a supporting skill, she has it as her special trigger. Usually dancers and singers can't enable one another to go again, but for special Requiem Dance, she is able to make that happen. Not by choice however, as the skill only grants the person with the highest HP another turn, but if multiple allies meet the requirement, then it won't go into effect. This skill also restricts their movement by 1. A bit odd they tried to keep her relatively balanced considering the rest of her winners didn't really have any penalties to worry about, but I guess IS is too scared to make dancer units really good or else the top meta picks would become even more of a problem. Moving on to her personal skill, Phantom Tome, is a weapon that references the darkness of her family lineage and the fear she has which caused her to be in such a depressed state for all of part 1 of 3 houses. So seeing her able to wield it and no longer tied down by her fears is amazing to see. It subtly hints at her character growth in a really neat way. All in all, Choose Legends 5 has some really great hits. The great hits continue with CYL 6. Let's begin with Byleth. Right off the bat she gets Divine Pulse. It does more damage based on her speed, along with reducing incoming damage by 75%. A really cool way to include a turn reset skill from G houses. A short and simple skill showcasing that she most likely used Divine Pulse and is using her speed to avoid incoming damage, hence the damage reduction. At least that's how I picture it. Her personal weapon is Inner Wellspring. It's something completely new to the series, but like I said in the previous video about this potentially being what Byleth could have ended up as, I can definitely see Inner Wellspring becoming a weapon that she would have used in Fulthlin. Up next is Sylph. One thing I do really love about this unit is the personal skills namesake get. He gets Air of Light. The second generation of Jugdral is treated as the Inheritors of Light, so the name of skill after that makes perfect sense and suits Sylph perfectly, as he and his sister Julia put a stop to the darkness engulfing all of Jugdral. His Holy Tide Tearfang gets a built-in miracle once per combat. This only adds to how Sylph is seen as the light destroying the darkness, as it feels like fate itself is protecting him. Lastly, this Refine restores 7 HP per combat. Next up, living up to a role from Awakening, Tiki gets a skill called New Divinity. It ties in for pretty much being a successor to Naga, so the name suits her well. Something I do wish faded differently was that the names for dragon weapons. They're usually treated as breaths, and I do really wish they were dragon stones instead. I feel like there's more room for creative names when it's stone based as opposed to dragon breaths. Regardless, her dragon breath is called Remote Breath. Nothing to add, but her special trigger art looks like she's using a dragonstone, so I feel a little more validated in my critique. Our last winner is Chrom. Unlike the rest of the winners, he gets a unique support skill named Fate Changed. It's a reposition skill that allows him to move once more, along with gaining all the bonuses from the units he moved to himself. Like I said earlier, I think it's really cool when the skills are references to the base game. For Chrom, it's about fighting against fate, and that the bonds one makes helps them break away from their destiny, which is perfectly in line for him. As for his lance, it's an upgraded version of the lance Brave Lucina has. I know it's just power cred, but I think it's really cool that he gets a version of her lance just like Lucina has parallel Falchion in Awakening. Choose Your Legends 6 was a much shorter segment than the other ones were. Let's see how Choose Your Legends 7 fares. So remember how I said Dragon Breath doesn't leave room for creative ideas? Well, thankfully Corrin does use a stone for her Brave Vault. It's called Valistone. Does it justify the fact that I gotta scroll to read the full description? Nope! But I digress. It does surprise me that she's an armored unit, mostly because I forgot that Faye tends to do that with dragon units every now and then. Like I said in part 1, the stone and outfit are clearly meant to showcase what a Valor promotion would look like if Corrin ever received one in Fates. She also gets Kanto, and if it triggers, it'll apply a Dragon Vein to her. Dragon Vein in specific applies effects onto space for her and her allies. It grants +6 to defense and res, along with reducing damage by 10 points, and it reduces area of effect attacks by 50%. Really cool how they implemented Dragon Veins from Fates into heroes like this. I haven't kept up with the meta personally, or the skills a lot of characters get, so I really hope that other units do have Dragon Vein based abilities. Her next skill is called Realms United, most likely named this because of her actions and revelations, helping unite both Nor and Hoshido. A great start to choose your Legend 7. I especially love the names of both her personal skills. For our next winner, we have Soren. He has a skill called Rare Talent, a reference to him being a very brilliant mage and strategist. His next personal skill is Arch Safe Tome, named after a high-skilled tome obtained in Radiant Dawn. Let's follow up with his fellow tactician, Robin. I'm a huge fan of the fact that they named his personal skill Tip the Scales after his crit line from Awakening. They also incorporated his skill from Awakening, Rally Spectrum, into this ult. It has 3 different effects, just like how it has 3 different stat buffs in Awakening. Of course, it's not as simple as that in Fae. As for his personal weapon, Deliverer's Brand, if Robin has a defense-based special like Ignis or Bonfire, and if his HP is equal to or greater than 25%, it'll calculate the damage based on the enemy's weaker stat between defense and res. A surprisingly really simple ult to understand, and it's really cool that they built it around Bonfire as it's originally a skill unique to his class in Awakening. Now let's discuss our final winner as CYL 7, Gulvig. Gold Unwinding. Most likely named after her abilities, they look similar to the gold dust in her book's cutscenes. For her personal weapon, the Cycle's Turn. It's a time-based ability. I'm not too familiar with her book's lore as I haven't read it yet, but if I'm correct, it's a reference to her being stuck in a time loop, right? If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments and I'll gladly pin it. That wraps up CYL 7. I'm very glad these characters have yet to receive refines. I am worried about the last 4 winners though, especially Felix because I saw a clip on Twitter the other day about the madness that is that unit. We're finally at the last CYL as of making this video. Like I said prior, I saw a clip of Felix that caught me off guard the other day. So let's start off with him, shall we? Making an exception to the rule a little, I want to start off by stating that his kit is heavily speed based. With that out of context, I can discuss his first personal skill, Lone Wolf. A bit of a cheater skill, if any skill compares his speed with his foe's speed, it'll treat Felix as if he has +7 bonus speed. He gets to move again if no assist skill is used on him by either himself or his allies. Along with getting to move again, he also gets Isolation to his next action. Isolation inflicts -5 to all of the foe's stats if Felix is alone, and will also add 20% of his speed to his next attack, along with 20% damage reduction based off his speed. That's barely scratching the surface of how this skill is. Good lord, how is Faye getting power crabs this? I do like how they added a skill based on who he is as a person, preferring Solitude for the most part unless it's training or for combat, along with Living Sword. Living Sword itself is a magic-based sword, and since Felix does have a decent attribute for magic, along with his final class having magic, it makes perfect sense for him to have Living Sword. A shame they didn't add his house shield to his kit, but to be honest, he already is pretty OP. Giving him a massive defense would have made him unstoppable. Our next winner is Robin again. I bundled her with her male counterpart in the last video because their designs were pretty much the same. Their kits, however, have some pretty noticeable differences. Starting off, we keep in line with her tactical prowess with a skill called According to Plan. Really cool how they reinvented Rally Spectrum for this unit, plus the name suits her intelligence really well. For her personal weapon, Exalt's Tactics. If a rally or assist skill is used on her or an ally unit, she'll apply Dragon Vein Ice to 2 spaces away from the target after moving for 1 turn. She does technically have Dragon Blood in her, so it does make sense that she'd be able to use Dragon Veins. I'm glad my hopes for Dragon Veins came true. Keeping in line with skills being deemed around a character, Bernadetta gets a skill called Paranoia. Hey, I'd be paranoid too if someone dropped a rock on my head. But in all seriousness, the skill does line up for a pro girl over here. She does tend to panic a lot in the monastery, but I've always headcanoned her as a surprisingly cool-headed person in combat, kinda like Kobani from Chains and Mandals few times. As for her personal weapon, the Inexhaustible, I'm glad a weapon from the Paralog was able to make it to the game like this. For our final unit to discuss today, we have Alphonse. Like Bernadetta, he is also a cavalry unit. Instead of a personal skill, he gets a personal trigger. In line with his royalty status, he gets a trigger called Makings of a King. His father would be proud. For his personal weapon, much like Bravike, he inherits his father's axe. Majestic Glintar gives him Kanto along with +6 to both res and defense, and the ability to move in extra space. It even lowers his cooldown as if the special trigger cooldown acceleration wasn't already enough. Like I said in part 1, I do hope Alphonse looks more like this in the story mode instead of his default sword design. After all, he is next in line for the throne. That's it for Choose Your Legends. I'm glad I split this up into 2 parts. I do plan on doing character deep dives for characters not just from Fire Emblem, but other series as well, so I hope you'll stick around for it. Also, I'm sorry for how long this took to upload. I'll try to be better about that in the future. Again, if I got anything wrong or if I missed anything, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and have a great day.